You are now listening to the Jar House podcast featuring food preservation. Before electricity allowed for refrigeration of foods, food was kept in an inefficient ice box or, in the case of milk jugs, kept on a rope down in the cool well. Much of the food that was grown on the property was also preserved by canning. As vegetables and fruits were harvested throughout the summer, the family would eat fresh produce, but the majority of the crops were carefully preserved for eating year-round. 19th century pioneers had few options for vegetables in the winter when nothing was in season, but when canning in jars was invented around the turn of the century, it revolutionized rural diets. As a result, homesteads could plant enough of something for an entire year and know that with careful preparation, the jars would put up, as they call it, until the next year's crops came in. The endless jars of preserved food were stored in the family's jar house. Mary Shaw remembers jarring any and all fruits and vegetables that grew on the land, including tomatoes, meat stalks, butter beans, peas, corn, and sweet potatoes, as well as all sorts of jellies made from fruits of the forest. The easiest method to jar or can is to submerge the filled jars into a vat of boiling water for a number of minutes. When the jars are removed, the seal in the jar lid pulls itself down into place as it cools. This worked well for higher acid fruits and jams. However, pressure canning was necessary for vegetables and meats. Initially, the Shaw family canned food with a simple water bath until the purchase of a pressure canner. Canning was such a laborious and hot process, and the results so important to life year-round on the homestead, that canners, almost always women, took pride in their work and viewed each jar as a precious supply. Jars were kept away from light and heat to keep the food inside from spoiling. Eating jarred or canned foods always allowed for much less cooking time later on in the year. The family could simply open a jar of meat, a jar of greens, and a jar of fruit for a full meal. Please proceed to the garden trail at the northwest corner of the Shaw property to listen to the Garden Podcast.